Well, first I must apologize. My camera is really not the greatest, and close-ups it's for zooming far away, not for close in. So it'll get blurry the closer I get, and it makes this humming noise. So I'm talking over the video. But anyways, the first thing you notice is the Japanese are red. You know, the British are orange. I just can't have the Japanese being orange. I just couldn't stand that, so I ordered my own blocks. And then I got stickers that came with it, so you don't have pips, you actually have the strength of a number. So 2, 1, stuff like that. And there's other details on it. For the commanders, I actually got stuff that have pictures. So that's Tojo, and then it has pips for the strength of them. That's pretty cool. I have Yamamoto and Tojo for the Japanese, and there's Nimitz, MacArthur, and Wavell for the Allies. And then you'll notice the carrier strike force that hit Pearl Harbor is turned upside down because you're not allowed to use them. So I put them face down. The Americans are always going to know pretty much what that group is, unless the Japanese break it up, which I wouldn't. But you'll notice I have all the Allied pieces turned around, because if I don't play this for the whole game in one sitting. I'll come back a day later, and I can't even keep track of what all the Japanese forces are or where they're at, let alone showing up a day later to take a turn. And if I sit on one side of the board, I can't remember really what the other side has. Maybe for the important hexes of the carrier strike force or something, but still you don't really know what the opponent has. So it does add to some fog of war going on here. Now, first things first here to note, the Japanese Supreme Headquarters all are at 4 strength, so they can get a lot of stuff done. The Allies are at 1 strength, and the rules state that you cannot activate a Supreme Headquarters if you're at 1 strength. So the Allies can't even activate their SMs on their first turn. Now, some rules we're going to be using are the Japanese will take the initiative on the first turn and the second turn. Then the Americans will get the turn go first if they choose on the third turn, and then we'll start rolling for initiative. So the first things we're going to want to look at here is China. Now, if you notice in China, the mountains that separate the hexes, that means only one block can move across that hex side. Now, they do have an air unit, and therefore an air unit can also go in a hex. You can always have one air unit in a hex. So that means across the mountain hex sides, which would be from here to the Chinese, you can only move one block and then an air unit. So you really don't need these 3 units defending it there. So I would say just putting 2 strength units there and keep them up pretty strong is going to hold Canton there. Now look to the south where Hanoi is. That's a jungle. So not only can he only move from Chongqing and the other territory, but it takes 2 hits to reduce 1 step. So you really only need 1 or 2 pieces there also. This one's impassable, so you don't have to worry about Siam too much. Now Burma is a nice one to take and hold. It's a jungle, therefore 2 hits required to reduce 1 step, and he can only come across from China with 1 block and India with 1 block. And then, of course, you can always use 1 air unit. So 1 or 2 units in Burma is good, and then it's worth 1 production point. Now, Dhaka, if the Allies can hold Dhaka and keep it controlled, then they can send production points to China. That's going to be a tough one to get, but we'll see how that goes. Now look at Shanghai. Shanghai is clear, therefore 2 blocks can go across that. And then to the north, it's mountains, so only 1 can come across. But that's 3 blocks that can get in there plus an air unit. So we need to keep 3 into Shanghai. And then Manchukuo, you need 1 or 2. Harbin 1. Seoul, you don't need any. So you can funnel these units down to Saigon. So that's what we'll be doing. And then we're going to have to spend production points to keep these units up to par if the Chinese keep going after them. Now look, the carriers I was talking about, each strength is basically a heavy carrier. So there's 3 carriers, strength is 1 block. The other carrier there, they call it, I want to say the Shokaku, and there's 3 strength on that one. So there's 6 heavy carriers there, and that's where the Japanese 6 heavy carrier there. And then they have a battleship and a cruiser. So this force is going to stay together, and this is my striking force that we're going after Americans with. And I advise not to break this down and make it weaker. And that one's going to have to stay up to par if it's going to be fighting the Americans. And this group, no matter if you're playing the fog of war or not, the Americans are going to know that group to watch. And just like when you find out where the American forces are when you fight, you're going to watch their carrier groups. And then out here at the Marshall Islands, you got a nice little force. And from there, we're going to go take the Gilberts and take Tarawa. And we'll start pressuring the Americans from there. And then it's a nice spot to move out your naval aircraft because they only move 1 hex. So from the Gilberts, you only reach the Johnston Islands. If you go and attack and fight in Hawaii, you don't get any naval air there unless you take Johnston Island. But that's, here or there right now. But the Gilberts is a good forward base to at least dominate Johnston there, and you can get aircraft to help fight there. And then I will be building up a second naval force somewhere over in this area as we come in, and you'll keep funneling, especially air losses and carrier losses. And then back here is the Soryu. It's the only other light carriers that the Japanese have in the game, and you just keep that back in the Indian Ocean to help keep that under control. And then Rabaul is a nice spot to control. And I think it's doable for the Japanese. You can pretty much plan on it. The Gilberts, Rabaul, and Wake here, and Marcus over here. You just control those. I think that's pretty doable. Other than that, you really don't know what's going to happen in the game and how much further out you can go. Of course, the money islands all got to be taken. But that's going to be all done in the first, second turn. Okay. Sorry. I'm kind of screwing up on the video. My big fat head was in the way a lot of it. So I'm going to just show you what I did here instead of you seeing it on camera. And it's pretty simple. So just remember, the Japanese will get the initiative on the first and second turn, the Americans on the third turn. Now, if we start in Siam, it's pretty simple. It's pretty simple the way I'm going to show you. If we start in Siam, we're going to take the Air Force 2 there and the Infantry 2, and we're moving them to attack Rangoon. Then we move to Saigon. In Saigon, we take the battleship and the cruiser, and we move them into Singapore. And the Infantry 2, we move to Sumatra to invade that. Now, because it's undefended, it's going to cost us 1 strategic movement point from our Army commander. I get hung up a little bit on the Supreme Headquarters. It says it must be activated when you use it. I guess that means you show it, what step he's at, and then at the end of the movement, you reduce it accordingly. And then it says it can only be activated once per movement phase. So the first time we use it is now. We activate it, we show him, and I'm going to use his steps until my movement phase is done, and then we'll turn him back upright. And then you take the naval air from Saigon and move it to Singapore. Now what's important here is you see 3 blocks we have moved into Singapore, and he has 3 blocks there. Now he's pinned. Those blocks are not moving when his turn comes. That kind of stuff's very important. Now, we go to Hanoi, which is the next one up the coast. And in Hanoi, we take the Infantry 3 and we move it to Siam. We take the Cruiser 3 and we move it to Borneo. And we take the Naval Air and we move it to Manila. And we take the other Infantry 3 and we move it to Borneo and an invasion. That's why you see it face up. Now, because he has a block there, that's going to cost us 2 strategic points from the Army commander. Now The Army commander has just used 3 of his strategic points. He still has 1 left. As far as I know, he's allowed to use it. I don't know if you kill the guy when you lose the last point or you choose to use it or not, but it doesn't really matter because in the production phase, you're just going to put him right back in the home island there. So I don't know. I just take him down to 1 and he's done. So, but right now he's used 3. Now the rule will specifically say that you cannot activate a Supreme Headquarters if he's a 1. But these were activated when they were 4. So I don't know if anybody has any ruling on that, but that's the way I'm doing it. And also just to make clear, the Army Imperial Japanese Army Supreme Headquarters commands all infantry units. Therefore, even though that infantry is invading, the cost comes from the Army. Now, if we move on down the road and we go to Canton, we take the 3 infantry there, we move it to Hanoi. Remember, a lot of these moves are not battle moves. They're just to make sure I'm covering. As you can see here, this is the final movement, the picture you're looking at. I'm making sure I have this area covered against the Chinese. Now, after moving the infantry to Hanoi, we take the Army Air Force 2 and we go to Manila with it. In Shanghai, moving up the coast, we take 1 infantry and we move it to Canton. In Peking, we take the infantry 3 and the garrison 2, move it to Shanghai. In Harbin, we take the Army Air Force 1 and move it to Peking. And the last one here in Seoul, we take the garrison 2 and we move it to Peking. Now in Formosa, we take the cruiser 2, the submarine 2 to Manila. The infantry 1, we go to Guam. That is 1 strategic movement point because it's undefended and the army is spent. And now you'll notice in the Philippines there, Manila, I have 4 attacking blocks. Therefore, all 4 American units are pinned. Matter of fact, you're going to see even at Davao, Borneo, the American units there are all pinned. Now in Peleliu, we take the Soru, the cruiser 2, and we move it to Davao. Again, I want to get rid of these units here if I can. I don't know if I can, but I'm sure going to try. And then the Marine 1, I'm going to hold there because I want to invade the Philippines next turn. I won't, like you can see on Singapore and the Philippines, I'm not hitting it with infantry. I'd rather take those money islands first, and we'll deal with the Philippines and Singapore after. I want to eliminate and blockade those when we're done here. Out in the Marshalls, we take the Marine 2, we spend 1 strategic movement point of the Navy, and we invade Tarawa. It's undefended. We take the submarine there, 3, and we raid Johnston Island. That's 1 strategic movement point. Cost to raid. So that's 2 off the Navy now. Then in Tokyo, I take the Battleship 3, Issei, to the Marshall Islands. He just does a double rebase move, doesn't cost. The Air Force there will go to Okinawa. The reason for that is if the Chinese attack any one of these 2 spots, I can at least reinforce with this Air Force and help them out. From Kure, I take the Battleship Nagato and I send it to Saigon. And that's just because I'd really like it out against the Americans, but Saigon's empty as far as ships go, and I don't want him retreating any ships in that direction, so I have to use that. And it's good to get that out there in case things go poorly against the British in Singapore. The Naval Air from Kure goes to Saipan. I'm going to start moving that out. And the Battleship 1 also goes to Saipan. Now, even though it's not built, as long as you have a supply line to the home islands, I can send production points to it and get that built up. And then from Hakodate, the Marine 1 there goes to Saigon. Now, I send that all the way down to Saigon, and I have to use a Navy strategic movement point to do that. But once again, I want a Marine down there because I need to hit either Singapore or Manila or something with him also. So I'm ready with forces around there to invade next turn. I have my carrier strike force sitting in truck, and I have a forward base sitting out there in Marshall still. And if you notice, I sent 2 submarines on raider missions. They are strength 3, and because to send one, if you sent one after that group, now you know the Americans are starting some ships there because the rules say they are. Carrier's one of them. If you only send one submarine, then when the Americans move, he can choose which unit gets pinned, and then he can move the other one out. So he would move the carrier out, and I'd be sitting there firing at a cruiser, which kind of sucks. So therefore, I moved 2 submarines there, and it does cost me 2 strategic movement points off my Navy, but hey, I think it's worth it. Now, both those units are pinned, and the American unit cannot move them away, and I'm going to get a raiding strike. On the raid, I get to shoot first. We'll see what happens. I'm going to go ahead and end the video here because I'm going to do the American turns, but I want to get it on live video. So I'm going to set up the camera a little different and show the Americans' movement before we start the battle. But all that will be on live video.